Vince, how are you?
We can talk later
Okay.
when the mic's off.
Okay, it is 6:30 and we do have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and start. I'd like to welcome you all to our August 8th, 2024 Planning and Zoning meeting. Can't believe it's August 8th already, but it is. McKay will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Katie, do you want to go ahead and do the roll call?
Vince Haley.
Here.
Todd Marks. Randall Kempton.
Here.
Sally Smith.
Here.
Aaron Richards. Jim Lawrence. Bruce Casper. McKay Francis.
Here?
Vanessa Johnson.
Here.
Rob Woodall.
Here.
Brian Thackeray.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we need to approve the Planning and Zoning minutes for July 18th. Anyone is ready to do that?
I can't read them. I can't pull them up.
Oh. Okay, you want to make the motion? Yeah, just make a motion to accept them as written.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we accept the minutes from July
18th.
July 18th as written.
I'll second that. So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or changes? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? And some abstaining, I think, so. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, I guess what we're doing tonight is we're going to go ahead and redo a public hearing on these amendments. Do we have to do it? Oh, okay, we have to. Could we have a motion to untable that, please?
I'll make a motion that we untable the previously tabled ordinances of fencing and billboards.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Now. Okay, Ellen, do you have anything to present before we open the public hearing again then?
I think.
Or were there any
You wanna go
questions?
again, or
I guess, any questions?
if you guys have questions, please ask.
I know that the reason why we tabled was because everyone didn't get a chance to review them. Has everyone gotten a chance? There was, again, very little to review. Vince, are you comfortable with what you read?
Yeah, I've got a few questions.
Okay, go ahead and ask your questions.
I don't know if you want to pull it up, Alan, or you want me to just ask?
I can pull it up here. Hopefully. It's not letting me in.
Cartridge.
I was just saying, I had issues pulling it up this evening.
Bad key. Agenda. Oh, that's just a PDF. Full packet. It's not gonna let us pull it up again.
Okay,
Yeah.
so do we all have this summary or should I, on the,
Do you guys have copies of it?
Because it sounds like that on the fences, it was modified definitions of fences and site triangles, added site triangle requirements for driveways and alleyways, clarified and reorganized fence requirements, and added quick reference infographics showing site triangles and fences. And then on the billboards, clarified definition of billboard, added grandfathered billboards as an exception to off-premise signs, and added billboard section to freestanding signs.
Can you get into your email, Alan? I can forward it to you.
Do that. But
Well, yeah, because Katie sent it to
I
us.
have one printed copy, but I only need one.
Come on. We are.
You have the invocation.
We won't be long.
Or the solo. Whichever.
The PDFs are also saved on the shared drive. If we can access it that way.
I did just forward it to you.
Get through the firewall.
Unless I'm in spam. Yeah. Ignore folder.
Doesn't look like mine.
which one do you have it under, Katie Jo?
It's just in the main department shares and not in a folder. And they're under draft underscore ord and then billboards and fencing. So,
You're under this one.
yes. And then scroll down. Draft ordinance, billboards and fencing.
Need to open both of them, don't I? We'll look at the billboard first.
Both my questions are on fencing, so.
Okay?
Any other questions on billboards? I think we went through that one pretty well.
And really, the premise of the billboard is no more billboards.
No more billboards and the grandfather
And
does.
then the ones that are completely redone,
Right.
it's got to be 50%.
That was the rule that they had in place. The request is to remove that 50% and allow them to rebuild existing, but not add new ones.
Okay.
Because they had some of the older ones that it just was hitting that point of they're not structurally sound. And so city council and, well, the mayor and them basically just says, we would like to see it stay, at least to be able to fix the existing ones.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there were some clarifications on some of the definitions, and then where it was allowed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, should we look at the other one then?
So all the billboards now are grandfathered?
Correct.
And if I wanted to put up a billboard now, I cannot do it?
Not in the city.
Not in the city.
Not in the city limits?
Right.
Okay.
And this paragraph right here kind of covers that. No new billboard signs will be allowed. Existing approved billboard signs shall be designated as having a grandfathered status and may be repaired or replaced. And the grandfathered billboards that are repaired or replaced are exempt from that 50% value clause. And then it just basically listed under the off-premise that they'll be in, they accept the grandfathered billboards.
And what's the date gonna be changed to right there?
This one,
Yeah.
basically, if this ordinance passes, billboards existing prior to this that have a grandfathered status.
Whatever
will
date
stay.
that it passes.
And I just want to confirm too that the changes in ordinance are merely, basically it's grandfathering existing billboards in, correct? And getting rid of the 50%.
Yes, it's grandfathering and allowing them to fix them where before they were hoping to eliminate them by saying, once it hits the end of life, you're done, you tear it down, you can't replace it. This allows them to continue to maintain it and replace it.
Sweet. Okay.
This was just in the definition to try to clarify what exactly a billboard is. Any other questions? Did you want to go over, are you just going to do the billboard separate and then do the other?
Why don't we go ahead and do them together? Is that okay?
Depends on Vince's questions.
Go down to page 7.
We'll kind of cruise through it as we get there, just
okay.
to show you. Anytime we have red, for those that haven't seen it before, that means we're removing it, or it's going to be moved to a new section. Green means it's a change. Usually, we've either moved it there or it's new language. So anything that stays in the black has not been changed. This is one, we're just calling out the site triangle for private driveways and alleys is 15 feet from property line. That clarification was not in there before.
And I'm 99% sure I understand at site triangle. But when it comes to fencing, we demonstrate that for me here.
Well, we'll get into it and I'll show you exactly, because we have got pictures now that people can look at and have those explanations so they'll understand. Because that's sometimes hard to understand just written. This one just comes in and says, again, for the site triangle, you do need to be administrator approved. We want people to come in and show us what they're doing to make sure they're meeting those requirements. It doesn't require a fee, doesn't require a building permit. We just want them to be able to come in and make sure that they're not making a mistake and then have to move it afterwards. Floodplain, some different things in there. Again, to go in the floodplain, they need our approval to make sure it's not affecting it there. And then barbed wire and electric fences, those are only allowed on tag or in certain circumstances for security fences, but they also have to be approved.
That was one of my questions. Why the tag only?
Cattle. Tag still allows cattle, so you would need barbed wire or livestock.
Well, so if I remember right, my cattle are not in a tag and are allowed and are in a barbed wire fence.
Existing barbed wire.
Well, right.
Your grandfathered as is now.
But so, right. But let's say I wasn't in an existing, or wasn't being grandfathered in. I'm in an existing zone that allows cattle, but because I'm not tag, I'm not
You're
gonna
either
have,
to do page wire or plastic or wood fence or something. Corrals would be allowed.
why do we care?
The look, you're getting into that. Do we really want barbed wire fences in neighborhoods where you're going to have more children running around, kids playing, aesthetics?
Okay, I don't, this is where I kind of walk the line of like government versus my rights. And, because my cattle last year were hopping my barbed wire fence a couple times. And I had to double and triple barbed wire to keep them in. So when the city comes in and says I can't do barbed wire if I were to do more fencing, this is where I want to stick it to them, right? And say, no,
Show me what to do.
don't show me. But I understand, right? Like,
Don't you
just
think a
didn't
nice
feel-
pole white fence that they can't get, vinyl fence would look nice?
Yeah. Also, when I was loading my cattle last fall, they jumped right through. Like, they did not want to get in the trailer, right? Like,
They knew where you were taking them.
yes, didn't want to die.
They're free-range cattle.
So again, that was one of my questions, like, why do we care if it's tag?
That was the reason. And this one, we just clarified the language. It was always been only allowed in tag.
I agree with Vince on that. I would like to see, if it's always been that way, only in tag, I would like to see that changed.
So we're not crossing out, what it's crossed out, I guess it's underneath it, except for agricultural use and transag. Security fences. I mean, it is what it is. I also feel like we're putting a lot of work on you when it comes to this. But if you say it's not, then that's not for me to decide, right?
It's easily handled with our department.
So what's your zoning? 2?
I'm in,
LDR 1 or 2.
I think it's
Two, is it?
LDR 1 is
No.
where my cattle are.
Not, it wouldn't be in 1, would it?
Wouldn't allow barbed wire.
Wouldn't allow cows, would it? Oh, well, it didn't used to.
We changed that. That's one of the ones we changed, right?
So, yeah, might be a good idea that you can't barb wire your own yard, I don't know.
You're getting into a pretty small lot when you get into LDR 1 and 2.
I know, but we passed that you could have cows, so you can't have barbed wire, huh?
But usually they're looking at that point, you're putting some kind of a protective fence. And I agree with you, Vince. I watched cow clear. We loaded it into a cattle truck. It jumped over the side, talking this high.
Yeah.
So they can do it when they're not happy.
I'm in RR1 is where my cattle
That's what I
are.
was thinking, that you're
You have a full.
in a rural zone, yeah.
So, I mean, if it's been there, that's fine. I mean,
Just hasn't been enforced properly.
I would vote to change that, but I don't know if that's gonna do anything.
For decision right now.
Next,
Okay.
and yeah.
The other one is site triangle, again with the fence. We're trying to make sure we're not obstructing vision in those areas. Also, your utilities. Anytime you're building a fence, you have to leave that accessible for power company, gas company, and you have to make sure you leave clearances so they can access, like the power boxes that they have to get into. So the fences have to stay out of those areas. We have to make sure they're clear of that.
And so for instance, if somebody's building a new house and they come into you, you're gonna tell them it's gotta be behind this line.
Correct. Yep. That way the power company can get to their transformers and stuff, or the gas company can get their valving, those types of things. So we just wanted to clarify that in there, the utilities, you have to build around them. Fence height, they still have that 3 foot in some areas, up to 6. After 7, you have to go in and then you're required to have a building permit. Because then you start getting to that point where you may need some specific anchoring to make sure it's not a hazard in doing that. One challenges that come up is when we start seeing lots that are double fronted, how you allow those, and we'll get into it a little farther, of showing you in the pictures how you can do stuff within that to make it work. Rear yards, you can go between 3 and 6 feet, go along property line. Dog runs have to be at least 10 feet away from the neighbor's property. One thing,
What is a dog run defined to be?
you're putting in usually a chain link fence or something that you're containing that dog within it. It's different than the whole yard. You can have the whole yard and have it in there, but that's a specific area that you put the dog house in and you keep the dog in that fenced area. We just don't want it right next to the neighbor, because then you have the chance of neighbor kids right next to it, the noise. You're trying to get a little bit of separation.
So if they're right up against the fence, which is right on the property line, they've got to move that 10 feet away.
Also that they need to maintain fence. They got to keep them in a good state of repair. We don't want them to become a nuisance that way.
Yeah, sure.
Number 9, fence adjacent to public sidewalk or bicycle path. One of the challenges has been people build the fence and then they build the gate to swing out over the sidewalk. Well, that creates a blind spot. They don't know if anybody's riding a bike down there. So all those gates have to open into the yard, not over the sidewalk. So that's a protection for the public sidewalks. Masonry fences and that, there's some modifications that may be requested. We would have to look at them and see if they meet the requirements. So that exception was allowed in there. Exceptions, sport containment fences, tennis courts, basketball courts, some of those, they would have to come in and get a building permit to go higher. But then we would look at that and go, okay, you're just protecting that sport court. So we would allow them to do that.
How much are those building permits?
I have never seen one for fence yet, so I couldn't tell you, but I'd imagine they're probably $65. They're pretty minimal.
Going back to the fence swinging over sidewalks and bike paths, if it swings both ways, or can it only swing in?
Only swing inward.
So you'd have to set it up so that it does that.
And typically, if you're using standard hinges, you can only go one way. You can buy special ones that'll let it go both ways, but it's one of those requirements. We want it to swing inward
Okay.
for that reason. Schools, churches, universities, they're also going to have some exceptions in there depending on the needs or the requirements. But they would be looked at on an individual basis, and then we would rule on those. The next one,
But didn't your document just say that they're exempt from having to be approved?
they're not exempt from being approved. They would need.
Scroll up a little bit. May be altered subject to prior written approval of the zoning administrator. However, site triangles must be.
Still got to maintain site triangle.
Okay.
So it still requires us to review it.
So you have to review the site triangle, but not anything else.
The height. When you start getting into higher, the sports containment and stuff like that, then we need to look at it mainly to make sure they're meeting safety, and also, are we going to allow it in that area? And now you get into examples. This is an overall scheme of all the different types of fenced yards you could see. This is one where you have access over here, but not onto here with the driveway, but you have a driveway here, and that's key when we get into it a little farther. These are all double fronted, this one, this one, this one, and this one. When you have a driveway coming out here, you cannot come to the property line with a 6-foot fence. But if you're over here where neither driveway comes out on that, they can come to property line with a 6-foot fence. And I've got some angled shots, frontage shots you can look at in a minute. The inner ones, you can't, the fences are not allowed to go in front of this yard over 6 feet tall, okay? And in these corners, they've got to stay down at the 3 feet. So let's look at these. And these are, you have the A, B, and C, and D. There's 4 different examples. Here's A of a front yard. There's your site triangle. Now, they could put up a 3-foot fence there if they wanted to. So that's 30 feet by 30 feet, and then that line there. That's a typical intersection site triangle. This is the same thing, only it's a driveway, so it's only the 15, 15, and then across. And the whole idea is to keep it so people backing up can see if there's people walking on that sidewalk or people pulling along the street. So you protect them that way. So there's that one. this is an example where you had one driveway coming out on it and not the other one, you have to stay at that 3-foot height on that street because you've got people accessing it and it's just not a long enough distance to protect them that way. Okay. Any questions as we go, please ask. This is inner lots.
Is there any kind of restriction when it comes to trees on that same 15 feet?
Yes, they have to be able to, you can't have the bushes or branches above 3. They can't go over 3. The tree itself can, but then you've got to trim them up to 10 feet so that you can see through. And we're recommending to people when they come and ask us, just say, keep the trees out of this site. We would prefer that. We don't restrict them. They can still do it, but they've got to clear those branches.
By 10 feet.
Yes. The challenge we have with that, the new subdivisions, you go out in Summerfield, they got a brand new trees planted. Well, if they trimmed to 10 feet, there would be a stick because it wouldn't be any higher. And so we have to give them some time to reach that height, maturity. Yep. Yes.
You know, this is kind of a little bit of a side note, but the city requires a type of tree for all these new developments going in, right, out on the parking strip. I don't remember had to be a certain size and everything.
Yes, 2-inch caliper at the base.
So all of a sudden, we have all these trees on these new properties that are starting to hit maturity. You can't see coming around these corners now. Anyway, I know that's not for tonight, but
It's,
I've hit 3 or 4 different points this week where I'm like, man, these trees look really nice along there, but you can't see coming around these corners.
we're working on the landscaping right now, which will address those issues.
Well, the reason I brought it up is my matured trees in Summerfield are getting to the point where I have to kind of ease out.
Because you can't see.
Doesn't help that my neighbors are always parked on the street either, right? But
And that your cow's standing there blocking the view.
my cows are not
They're
at
not
my
in
house.
Summerfield. But you could have them.
Yeah.
They're pretty though.
And this is showing the one where, this is the regular street, but this one would allow that 6-foot fence where you have nobody entering along that whole block. But again, in the site triangle, they could do the 3-foot fence. Any questions about those? Just trying to see, that's everything that we had as far as changes within the fence code.
I just want to circle back to the barbed wire thing. So we allow cattle in certain
In every
areas.
zone.
What was that?
In every zone.
In every zone. But we can't have barbed wire except in tag. So we're either requiring people to put up some big, thick metal or wood fence to try to hold cattle or just not have them. Is that what the city plan is, or?
That's basically it at this point. If you want to have them in those other zones, you're going to have, the large animals, I believe we stop at RR2.
I thought we could have them everywhere.
Yeah.
Wasn't that our big deal? Or did they not, we did change it?
I remember we debated that one pretty hard.
Wasn't high density, and I think it's.
High density and
Well,
medium
all the
are not
residential, all
allowed.
the residential areas.
Yeah, and I don't think medium
Not
density
medium
was either.
density, no.
But I think up to LDR3, they were allowed.
We didn't
But
think,
you're
of-
talking one animal.
but that, it's got to be fenced in though.
It does.
And I'll bet people, if they knew that that was available, would be putting up barbed wires.
Well, and that's where you start looking at that. If they want to keep it, they've got to have it contained somehow. Because they also have got to protect the neighbor from nuisance of noise, smell, everything else. So usually that requires a solid fence of some type.
I don't know about a fence keeping in smell, but
If you can't see it, it's hard to assign where it's coming from. Most of them will know, because they'll see the horse or the cow.
I'm gonna tell my wife that. If you can't see it, you can't blame it on me.
Then they got to prove it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think if I dove into every ordinance, I'd think, man, the city has a lot of power. But at the same time,
But see, that's interesting, because I don't think that was something that was ever considered at the time. You know,
We
but it
didn't.
could build a pretty ugly fence in your neighbor's yard.
I just know that the reasons they got away from barbed wire in the other zones, because it really doesn't fit within the city. It's not what you want. It is designed specifically for animals, and I understand if I'm gonna allow an animal, how am I going to contain it? You also can put page wire. They can't get through a page wire. They could jump it, but they can't get through it.
What is it?
Yeah, what's
Page wire is like the 4-inch square.
and that's what I've got
Yeah.
with the barbed wire on top.
You got 2 strings on the top or just one?
Now I have 2.
Okay.
I had 3.
Okay. They took one out.
Well, it was a temporary 3.
Okay.
They were. But yeah, I mean, but they did, when he didn't want to get in the trailer, he pushed right through that, what you're calling page wire. He just busted right through it.
Took it out.
He doesn't care.
No. When they're scared or angry, it's very hard to contain them.
So, and again, if we're going to allow that large of an animal and say it can fit, if we're going to allow it within this zone, but we're not going to allow barbed wire, then why are we allowing that animal in that zone?
Well,
I agree with
I don't think
that.
that was ever thought about. That
Nobody
adequate
discussed
animal.
it.
It's not
We
just
didn't.
what I didn't like, adequate space.
We did.
I think you have to have some uniformity between the two.
Well, you can still contain the animal. You just can't use barbed wire. Nobody's stopping you. It's more expensive is what it's gonna cost. And then you gotta look at the aesthetics. Not everybody wants barbed wire on their fence line. Even if I don't have a cow, I don't wanna see barbed wire in the city. And that's the reasoning behind not wanting barbed wire.
Yeah.
On the flip side, though, what if you want a fence line but your neighbor behind you doesn't?
Then you put it in.
Right? But
They can't stop you.
but they still can is what I guess
Yeah.
is what I'm going at. Like,
Yeah.
But you'd have to really police that, though, because it's legal to have the animal. They don't have to come and ask permission. They don't have to ask permission for a fence. So they don't know what kind of a fence to put up. You would think the most inexpensive fence would be.
Barbed wire.
So we'll see if that ever happens.
But I look at it, we've driven all over the city, and other than a few RR1s, that is the only place I have seen barbed wire
Yeah, there's
in
no.
the city. If I get beyond that, everybody else has got either no fence, or they've got vinyl, or they've got a wood fence, they've got
Yeah.
something else, so. But so far, it's never been an issue up to this point. And hopefully, everybody's happy with where it's at, and
And I also recognize that there's a lot here for you to quote unquote police that you may or may not have the manpower to police, right? So it's here for the need for it, if it has to be needed.
here's the answer to that question. Most citizens do a lot of the police work for us in reporting their neighbors. That's usually what we do, is respond to complaints. But once in a while, we do actively certain things. We go out looking to see if everybody's in compliance. One in particular is keeping the lots mowed down in the summer. Natalie has a whole list that she chases most of the summer, getting that done. But looking for barbed wire in the city, it's usually when somebody complains.
Yeah.
This has been a ton of fun, and I say this respectfully. Let's move on.
Okay.
Just off of the barbed wire and single animals.
Okay.
I think we've exhausted it.
Yeah. Which, it's your choice whether to remove it or leave it in.
See, I would vote to leave it.
So would I.
I would say, Commissioners, I
This way-
think officially we're supposed to have a public hearing, which is not going to, this has been question time, right?
You do need to have a public.
We haven't actually done our public hearing thing and then done our
Then
discussion.
do your
Just-
commissioner discussion.
Okay.
That's just a
All right, let's
procedural
do
thing.
that.
I just-
Okay, let's go ahead and open the public input portion of the hearing. If we have anyone who would like to speak in favor, neutral, or opposed, they could come forward, state their name and address. Do we have any written correspondence, Katie?
No.
Okay, so seeing no one, any of the city people would like to talk? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public input portion of the hearing then. Okay, any further discussion? Before we recommend it to city council.
So just as I've been listening to this, cool discussion, it's been fun. You know, there's no way that in an ordinance, in any kind of lawmaking ordinance, that you can replace common sense and common courtesy. We've been through that before in other discussions. You know, you can lay out the ground rules and so forth, but you can't. You know, it comes down to, you know, people wanting to take care of their neighbors and respect their neighbors. Ultimately, I think. So I'm a little bit kind of on Vince's side in terms of being, you know, the more rules that we put down, the more exceptions people are going to find, or more loopholes people will find to get around it. Just like the cows pushing through your fence, Vince, people will find a way to do what they want to do. But having said all that, I don't know that there's any. I don't have any particular objections to what we presented here, and I would not object if the barbed wire language were removed myself, but that's all I have to say.
Let me ask you this. In passing these adjustments, because we know that, you know, any ordinance change, any zone change, whatever we do is not going to be immediate, right? We're not going to see poof, things change. Is there any kind of outlook of how far you guys say, we're hoping to have things change in X amount of years with an ordinance change, or like we did with downtown zoning? Like, what's the
Long-term goal?
long-term outlook and on timeline?
So you're looking at a major override, or we've just finished going through everything?
Well, let's say for this, the fencing and the billboards amendments.
You know, Vince, I think as long as you have people coming in and situations change, it's going to be a full-time job for us making adjustments. You're just going to continually have modifications, new situations, different people requesting, or usually laws show up or rules show up because you have people in conflict that can't get along. So government steps in and creates a rule to try to mitigate that.
As growth continues, though, there will be, in the next 5-10 years, conversations that
Yes.
we never thought would take place
Yes.
in places that they've never taken place.
Yep.
As it expands out to Hibbert, as it expands out to other areas, conversations that only took place in a, you know, a 2-mile square circle within, you know, town square, it's gonna continue to spread out,
Always change.
and it's just the reality of growth.
It will.
So, and this probably has nothing to do with, well, it has with things in particular. I mean, no matter how hard we try, the public they're welcome to read this ahead of time. It's all, you know, it's all published, right, to them. But that's my frustration, is people don't know what we do in this room or the next room. I mean, they have no idea. I'll bet you could ask anybody in Rexburg if they know that you can have a large animal in your yard. A lot of people, you know, and they don't know that. They don't know that they can't have barbed wire, and probably would never think about having it unless, you know. So that's kind
And
of,
that was and here's the thing. If we go back, if we unpeel that whole discussion, why did we allow one single animal? It's because a concern was brought up by a citizen talking about kids doing 4-H and their inability to have a 4-H animal. So a very specific circumstance situation in which, and something, you know, concerns were heard and changes were made and whatever else. And so now as a resulting change, it's like, well, if we're gonna allow that, then should we allow barbed barbed
Barbed
wire
wire.
should be allowed, you know, it to look like a
Mhm.
war zone.
Right.
And, you know, and so there's some of those fallout from, again, from individual concerns that necessarily, they're just not gonna come up because you would like to think that reason and common sense and that people are generally reasonable and they think, you know what, in this subdivision, you know, I'm not gonna make it look like, you know,
A farm. Or a ranch.
or like what's the race, the races they do, where the mud.
Like a motocross?
They jump over the wall.
A
and they
motocross?
fall under the barbed wire.
Oh, yeah.
When they do with there's one they do
I
with
know,
the ones.
but again, and
Obstacle
like I said,
races.
I know that one thing leads to another, but that's always my frustration is I wish there was some way to make people aware, and we try. I think we do the best job we can
Most of us don't worry about it until all of a sudden the problem's in our yard.
in our next door yard
Yeah,
typically.
when it becomes our neighborhood.
So I think Spencer brought up a pretty valid point, though, that as we see growth, though, we're going to have discussions and conversations that we weren't anticipating. And potentially by addressing this now, are we going to be able to maybe hedge against some of those conversations that we're going to be having when we do start expanding city limits out into Hayward and more further into the county? And there are people that do have animals that all of a sudden there is a conflict between them and their neighbor. They're allowed to have these animals. They've been allowed to have this barbed wire fence forever. And now all of a sudden we're in this predicament.
But you've got to a place where they are grandfathered. If they are doing it when they are brought into the city, you can't make them change. They can continue with that same deal. It's when it's developed, turned into a housing development, then they have to come to the new rules.
And to your point, and this is not on a specific issue, this is just a
Right,
general
any
statement.
issue.
We have, there's nobody here tonight. A lot of meetings, there won't be anybody here. Some meetings will get one person with one specific concern. The issue that faces this board, city council sometimes, and just government in general, is you have to balance one person or 10 people bringing a specific concern versus on a question where the alternative impacts 5,000 people or 10,000 people. And there's a balancing there that has to take place where you acknowledge those needs. If they're appropriate, yeah, you absolutely address them, but you cannot ignore
The other
the
people.
majority.
I think that's where common sense comes in.
Sidestepping it, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about the fences that we did earlier. You said anytime someone puts in a fence, they need to have someone come out and okay it. Is that what that section
They
said?
either come, they can do one of two things. They can call me and explain to it. I pull it up on GIS. They tell me where they're going to put the fence. And as long as it meets parameters, great, go ahead. They've got my approval. I put a note in the system for them. Or they can draw it out quick and drop it off to me and I'll look at it and say, yes, this is approved.
So my question is implementation of that, because you, like we were just talking about, there's a lot of people that aren't here that don't know any of that. So someone goes in, put a 6-foot privacy fence around their place that doesn't follow this, like, you're like, well, you should have come and, like, how is that going to be, like,
How do
the
we
citizens are
warn
gonna go?
people?
Yeah,
We contacted every single fence company in the valley we could find.
okay, so,
Informed them that this is the new code in Rexburg. It doesn't require building permit, but you need to at least check with us to make sure it's done correctly.
Okay.
We've got a lot of fence companies that call us up and say, here's what we're doing, and they'll tell me, and I says, great, move forward.
okay. So then your only big issue is DIYers, like people who want to build their own fences?
Yeah, somebody wants to build their own. We do.
DIYers?
Yeah.
DIYs.
Barbed wires?
Yeah, barbed wires, whatever, however you want to say that. So yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm just wondering because like I just do stuff all the time on my property, and it wasn't until I got into this position that I'm like, oh, I
Should have.
need to
got
make
permission?
sure.
It all makes sense now. Vince is starting a fencing company that only does barbed wire
There you
fencing.
go.
All makes sense.
No, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's just my only thing is that if someone doesn't do it, is it kind of just like a hey, or is there any enforcement of this now that we're saying that it's in the code that you have to approve?
If we run into situations where we find it, and we're usually pretty good, once a week, I drive as much of the city, and usually I have to alternate, pick different areas. But I drive through and look. Natalie is constantly out there on the streets looking. And so when we see situations where somebody starts building a fence, And we go, oh, we'll stop in and say, hey, you may not have known, but here's some of the rules that you need to do. And we try to proactively
Get at
do
it.
that as much as we can. And we've had a few where the neighbors call up and say, well, they're doing this.
Is that okay?
Yeah, and that's when we go out and look at it, and yes, they are following the rules. And it's letting the others know, yes, they are within the rules.
And then my other thing is that if someone does do it without, is there any like
Recourse?
penalty? Yeah, like are they
There
gonna
is
get fined?
recourse. We usually try to work with them personally for a while, but if it becomes a vagrant ignoring us, then they can, at the worst case, they can be cited.
Okay. Yeah, that was just my big thing is because
I don't know of any, I've been here 5 years and I have not seen anybody cited yet. We usually go out and spend as much time as we can trying to talk them through it, help them through it.
okay.
Any further discussion, or are we ready for the question, Vince?
So, I mean, through the discussion, thinking through, where I grew up in the middle of town, yeah, no usage. And by no means should there be a usage for barbed wire, right? If the commission's open to it, I would propose that we allow barbed wire in Transag, RR1 and RR2.
What are your minimum lot sizes?
Half acre for R2, 1 acre for tag and R1.
Aren't we working on getting rid of RR1 and RR2?
Redefining, not getting rid of. We want to keep those options open. The one that may change more than anything is tag. And the other aspect we're looking at in the future, which will fit better with what Vince is saying, we want to make it so impact area, they may not be able to have other zones available to them until they become part of the city.
They couldn't get a zone change in.
So they couldn't go too high. We may limit that. We haven't decided what or where, and it'll be a work meeting before we even get down that road. But one of the things we want to avoid is somebody asking for MDR, HDR in the impact zone. And we're going, no, that should be when you are coming into the city, because it requires sewer and water. So now we're extending services way beyond our borders to try to solve that. So that would address some of that. And then at that point, you could say, tag, RR1, RR2, yeah, this would probably fit to continue to have barbed wire at that point.
And I'd even settle with RR1. Like at the 1 acre, right? You can't, at that point, you're having to have some way of taking care of your pasture or your lawn.
Because legally, you can't water the whole thing with a well, and you can't afford to do it off the city water.
Yeah, was that considered in the city's discussion of that particular language, having only tag there? Because I think I'm on Vince's side with allowing the RR1 personally.
Tag was something that had carried over, and so we just never thought of moving into a higher one. But it is an option you could look at, and it's something you can do in your motion to say we want to include RR1 allowing barbed wire.
I mean, and I get where the
That's a
city's
rural
coming
zone.
from. The more that I think about this, think about north towards the temple, by the Muir property, by, the Munns property out there, right? That's all going to be developed sooner than later, right? But until it is, it's very agricultural use.
But until it is, it's grandfathered. This ordinance wouldn't affect it anyway.
A lot of the zoning.
On existing fences.
No, and existing uses.
Existing use.
If it is still an agricultural use, they could continue to use the barbed wire.
Or they could put a new one in.
They can replace, they can add a new one. If he's got 40, 50 acres out there and he wants to split it into 4 parcels to rotate cattle, he can put the barbed wire in because it's a farming use. He's not doing.
If you buy a lot in a new subdivision that's within city limits, and I don't even want to guess anymore. Let's say you put $800,000 into a house, or $750,000 into a house that's 1 acre. Do you want your neighbor to have a barbed wire fence?
If I wouldn't hate it, I'm trying to move out to that area so I can do that and have cattle behind my house.
Yeah,
It's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, but you're going to the county, aren't you?
But it doesn't matter, like, if I had 1 acre, I'd want cows on it, right? Like, that's why I would move there.
On 1 acre.
So because you don't see it, Spencer, doesn't mean that I don't see it.
No, but what
Right.
you don't see though is the disputes that happen, I'll say monthly, because I don't want you to think we have a cantankerous community. The amount of spike fences and frustration that happens, and Alan knows this, between two individuals
Oh,
that
yeah.
are fighting over property line, a tree, anything, and then somebody is permitted in that, within a zone like that, to be like, well, you know what I am gonna do, because legally I can do it, I'm gonna throw a barbed wire fence and make it look like, you know,
War zone.
Don't describe it as war zone. Barbed wire is not war zone. I don't like that
It's
description.
it's farming use.
Trench
Like-
warfare.
I come from,
See, what I'm hearing is the tension between city and country and farm that we have had since I've been on this, since the growth has happened in this city, since I moved here 25 years ago, and the college went to 4-year. That this tension between this growth from country thinking to city thinking is, yeah, we're gonna have, we have conflicts.
why do we have grandfathers?
Yeah.
Why do we bring it in?
Just to protect those.
No, that's what I'm saying, so that's, I mean.
It's
to
painful,
reflect that tension.
yeah. It's painful for the folks who've been here for a long time. They don't want to see their country ways taken away because the city needs of a large population.
Don't even have that out.
You can't have a large population and not have more rules. It just doesn't work. Otherwise, we end up with, a city that we don't want to live in.
Well, and here's something to look at. Having driven the whole city and all parts of it,
Go around his.
I don't see barbed wire fences within the city. Rarely. You may see some out in Willowbrook.
Cows and you're in the.
But that's
right
it.
area, That's fine.
I don't know of any other place that has barbed wire in it.
and that's why I can see both sides. I'm asking for our R1 from the commission. If you guys don't want to do it, then I'm willing to move forward.
Well, think of Willowbrook when you think RR1, think of Pine Brook First
What
Division.
about their covenants? Because that could. be-
Covenants can restrict it also.
Like that, and I'm sure, I know there's always a section on
Yeah.
fences and.
You see, in ours could trump
Yeah.
that, but that's beyond our scope.
Right, but I think, Bruce said we don't have any in ours, but I'll bet it's not,
Not in this.
not allowed in the covenants. Because all covenants talk about fences.
Yours, Pine Brook is R1?
Part of it is. The south portion where David Taylor and them live, that part is RR1, the rest of it is RR2.
Yeah, and that puts it in perspective. I mean, maybe I am thinking more of county 1 acre versus in city.
Go across the road from Pine Brook and you're into Tag, and that's the area you're talking about where Duffy's building his house. Those guys in there, so they do have barbed wire fences in that area, which it's allowed. They have animals, a lot of those are 4 and 5 acre lots.
All right, well, I'm good with leaving it the way it is.
Well, would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we recommend to city council that they approve the new language in the fencing and billboards sections of the code. Are we good including the billboards as well? As written.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we will recommend that.
My problem is I just watched The Great Escape. You guys remember that movie?
With the barbed wire.
Well, that was billboards, we didn't talk. fences.
Yeah.
That's what we've been talking about. Steve.
I know,
But
but
we did billboards.
in that moment.
Yeah, we did.
that moment, Okay,
Oh, yeah.
thank goodness. He did dead horse.
But yeah, but see, that's a city person looking at barbed wire and saying war zone, and a country person looking at it and saying, I'm protecting my cows. And there's no, that's city versus country, and the farmer and the cowman should be friends. I lived in Burton. I know, I had cows in my raspberries all the time, After about a year, I'm like, okay, well,
And what's funny about that is Vince grew up in the city and I grew up in the county.
Yeah.
Vince lived in the city, I lived in the county.
so I learned. It took me a couple of years, but I figured it out. It's okay. This country.
The scariest thing I ever seen, the neighbor right across from my house, he has wood fences. I mean, we're talking 6, 7-inch pine posts, railroad ties. You had 2 bulls in there. And one day, those 2 got fighting. Leveled every single one of the fences all around them. Those bulls did not care what they were going into. And at 2,000 pounds apiece, they
They
were
can move.
bulldozers.
You know what the county would say to that? You know what we should do is we should take money to those bulls. And we should allow teenagers to chase them.
Okay, our August 15th meeting, like this one has been moved to August 22nd. Nothing as far as you know that?
At this point.
We'll wait and see, okay? Anybody have anything else that we need to talk about?
Not on the record.
Okay. Okay, we are adjourned.